And welcome once again. It is the Fantasy Football Forum, and it is mock draft day, or for some of you, it is draft day today. This is the busiest draft day weekend for fantasy football, as it is probably the earliest you should be drafting, unless you are one of those diehard fans of fantasy football and you've been drafting all summer, or you just could not wait and you drafted already in August. So hopefully you avoid injuries. Between this weekend and next weekend are going to be the two most draft heavy weekends. But today, we're going to go through something a little unique where this is a home league. I am joined, of course, by co host Grant as well. And we got special guest Jake from. So, Grant and I, as you all know, are in a home league together, and Jake is also in our home league. And we're going to run through our home league mock draft. So this is a Superflex 10-team PPR league. It's also with keepers. So as we go through this, we'll be talking through our draft strategy, if we had a keeper and why we wanted that keeper. And we'll kind of go through our roster building construction and what our thoughts are. So, Grant, Jake, welcome aboard. Ready to have some fun?
Glad to be here.
Thanks,
Excited.
man. Oh yeah, only an hour and a half before the real draft. This is perfect.
Any bit of advice before we get started, as those that may be listening later want to pardon some of your advice on them as they prepare for their drafts.
I think my only advice I have is don't get caught up in the FOMO with a certain position. It is easy to start grabbing tight ends, quarterbacks, especially in a super flex league, but overpaying for certain players because of either the team that they're on or you see other people kind of go early and grab those players. It can be easy, especially in a standard or like half point PPR. So you're grabbing tight ends really early or a quarterback really early. So that's kind of the general advice. Superflex is a little different. You'll see a lot of quarterbacks go off the board first compared to
Yeah,
other players. But that's the big thing, is just not overpaying. Don't get caught up in it. Don't feel panicked. You have time on your clock. Look through your picks. Understand what your research you've been doing this summer. Kind of go through the progressions, for lack of a better word, of what you want in a player and pick, especially in the first few rounds, safe, consistent bets.
I
Awesome,
agree.
awesome advice. Jake, do you have any other words of advice?
Um, I mean, not really. I think it's really important to be able to recognize the drop off between elite quarterbacks in a super flex league and
Mm,
where that gap is. After say like Herbert and Jackson and and a few of those guys, there's a
Mm-hmm.
significant and whether you're reaching for a quarterback versus going for top tier talent such as like Jefferson or something. So
Mm-hmm.
being able to kind of there is value definitely in a super flex league to take elite quarterbacks, but not all of them are elite. So you got to be able to and there's some
Yep.
question marks on a couple of them. So it's hard, but
Not good point.
yep, great point. The thing I will say, it's kind of my TED talk of the off season and preseason specifically. Don't get caught up too much on preseason statistics with players. There are things that we can learn from the preseason, but storylines are storylines. And again, we've talked about it before in other shows, but don't get caught up in I need to chase certain players. Understand where value comes to you. So don't go player chasing or player reaching
right.
if that happens. So out of this mock draft, so I have the 101 pick for our league this year. Grant, you are drafting out of the 106. Jake, you have the 110 spot this year. So we have the beginning of the draft, the end, and somewhere in the middle. So a little bit of mix here for everybody where we get to hit everything in one show here, all of it. And if you guys are ready to hit this mock, I will get us going.
Let's do
Let's
it.
do it.
And let's go. Yes, I'm going to start it. All right. So, oops. Hold on a sec. let's pause for a sec. And because I got a notification that the draft has begun.
I did too. Let me see.
Hold on a sec. Well,
I think it's a mock draft. I think so. I say that.
I say that too. So, for those listening, this is really bad radio here. But anyway,
No, I think we're okay. I think we're okay because it still says an hour and 27 minutes till draft for our league. So I
does
think we're
it?
okay. Yeah,
Okay, perfect.
on my phone at least. I think you're fine. And if not, guess what? We'll reset the board afterwards. No big deal.
Yep.
Right?
That's right.
Well,
Yeah.
so for those listening, we are using actually the Sleeper app, and this is the form I may or may not have just started our actual league draft when I'm trying to do a mock draft. So this is kind of why you do this early on. But we'll see how it goes here. Oh, hold on. Now I don't know where that draft went. So
There it is.
let's. Well, no, that's a different one that I had
Oh.
because you guys aren't on this one. So let's do this again here, I guess. Where.
You want me to back out of this draft?
Well, yeah, okay. I have a nope. I got it here. We're good. So that draft started.
There
So,
you go. I see online. There you go.
all right. So let me pause this here real quick. And well, so I'll get to my talking points here. The timer's going on, but that's fine. Here I am looking at quarterback, with my first pick, just because, and the choices are between our keepers. I have a choice between Herbert, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow, because Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts are all selected as keepers. So for this, I chose Justin Herbert for the reason I think he led the league last year in pass attempts. I think he could lead the league again in pass attempts. I think we saw his floor last year with what his ability was. As far as what he can do, they got a new offensive coordinator. The Chargers look to be primed to do a whole lot. While Justin Jefferson is technically sitting there at the 101, being a Superflex league, I think I hinder my team too much by not drafting a quarterback. So, Grant, after that little rambling and the reason why, on to the second pick, or the sixth pick, and you are up.
Yep. So my thought process is that kind of what Jake mentioned as the advice is like the next quarterbacks on the board are like Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields. I think definitely there's the elite quarterbacks are off the board at this point. It's kind of the second tier. I'm looking at value, and I think that instead of paying for kind of this top mid-tier quarterback of like a Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Justin Jefferson is sitting there right for me at the 106, which I think is good value. I'm not overpaying for a positional player. And I can probably, you can look down the list for the quarterback logic is like a Daniel Jones or like a Geno Smith or Aaron Rodgers is like a 285, 275 point projection, right? And those top quarterbacks that are sitting there are like 308, 339, etc. So for me, I'm picking Jefferson, probably going to be the best receiver in the draft. I get good value out of that without overpaying for a quarterback.
Very good. All right, we had Kelsey got taken next. And again, with mock drafts, this is kind of one of those we don't know what's going to happen. But Kelsey goes next, and because Team 8 and Team 9 both had keepers, Jake, you are up.
All right, so I got 2 picks in a row here. I don't know how I really feel about Lawrence and Fields as far as comparably to some really top-tier talent such as Chase or Cup. Or even Eckler and maybe Robinson. I'm not really sure, but I think my first pick is definitely going to be Chase. That takes care of my wide receiver 1 position for the whole season, hopefully. And now the decision has to be made whether I want to pick one of these quarterbacks or wait a little bit. And right now, I think I'm going to wait a little bit. I'm going to take Eckler here to give me a wide receiver 1 and my RB1 right after that.
There you go. One more wrinkle, Grant, here before you pick. This is a start 3 wide receiver league, so it's not a
Mm-hmm.
start 2 like a standard league. So there are a few differences about this league as opposed to a just a standard league. So Grant, we then
True.
saw the quarterbacks that Jake passed on, and with
Mm-hmm.
Lawrence and Fields go off with Cup in the middle there, and now you're back at the 205 position. And
Yeah.
your thoughts?
Yeah, so this obviously these are computers except for three of us, so it's going
Sure.
off of basically ADP. And like I said, those quarterbacks we talked about are off the board. So there's a bunch of positional players. The next quarterback down, if you're super flex, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna panic. Like the quarterbacks aren't available. Like what am I gonna do? But look at the board. People are picking a lot of their quarterbacks already. So what I'm doing is I've got a receiver in the first round. I also have Tony Pollard, who's my RB1 that I have as a
Mm.
keeper in the 8th round. So for me, I feel like I'm decently balanced. I'm probably going to look for like the best value. Probably going to prefer to pick a receiver because we have a 3 receiver league like Jeff mentioned. So what
Mm.
I'm probably leaning towards my thought process like AJ Brown or Stephon Diggs. I like the offensive situation in Buffalo a little better. I feel like AJ is gonna do well. I think he's gonna do a little better than he did last year. We've talked about that in their previous podcast, but they've got some mouths to feed, and I also think Devontae Smith's gonna be a little better than he was last year. So for me, I'm probably gonna lean towards Stephon Diggs.
Okay. So doubling up with Diggs, that's actually not a bad build. And Grant, that's a great point you mentioned too, where yes, this is while it's a mock draft against a computer
Mm-hmm.
at 7 out of these 10 spots, but if you're in your league drafts and you're looking at the board, looking at positional, who's taking what. So, like you said, out of the 10 teams, 6 of them selected a quarterback in the first round, 2 of them, and one of them being one team selected a quarterback. So you are with 3 teams that have yet to select one quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
2 teams, or the rest of the teams, except for one, still need their second quarterback. But if you're going for some positional value here, so being again on the turn, part of my viewpoint on the turn here, especially being the first, is I need to get some positional guys. Being a 3 wide receiver start, I definitely need to grab my wide receiver 1. Out of this list, I most like CeeDee Lamb with the opportunity there. I think while the offensive coordinator and Kellen Moore left, I still see a lot of value with what Lamb has to offer. So locking up my wide receiver 1 in the second round is a very good value. I could go a couple different ways here. And the way you have to think about this on the turn is, especially later in the draft, you have to be willing to reach potentially a round or two, knowing there's going to be that many picks before you get your pick again.
Right.
With this early in the draft, so you can't see it on the board, but my actual keeper is Rashad White. So I have a running back that I'm keeping. He is not going to be, he potentially is not going to be an RB1. Now, weird things could happen, but I'm not anticipating him having an RB1 season. He could do very well as an RB2. I still need that solidification of an RB1 still. Looking at this, Nick Chubb is screaming value right now. If this were to happen in a draft where Chubb is available at the 301, I'm going to take that and be able to go a couple wide receivers, get my second quarterback, go get a tight end later versus pushing running back down and hurting my position as my RB1 later. So
Mm.
Nick Chubb is that selection, but again, you could double up being a 3 wide receiver set or 3 wide receiver start and go 2 wide receivers back to back there as well. So Grant,
Good point.
we saw Taylor, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devontae Adams, and Tua go off the board. So one of the teams that did not have a quarterback now does. So you are up with after taking Jefferson and Diggs.
Mm-hmm. So here, I think this is where I didn't panic with the quarterbacks. I'm one of the few teams to not have a quarterback in a super flex league, which people are typically like, "Oh my gosh, pick something. Someone's got to, you got to get a pick in soon." And what I did was I was patient with my quarterbacks. based upon how the draft has gone, I have the option to pick Dak Prescott as a quarterback. Also look at another like running back like Derrick Henry, who's been solid, or Mark Andrews, which all these guys are going to be off the board by the time I get to pick again. For me, I am probably going to pick a quarterback at this point, because Dak Prescott again is one of those like the top quarterbacks of that large middle section where you have the top of like Herbert, Jackson, Burrow, Hurts, Mahomes, Allen, right? Those are like the top elite quarterbacks, and then of the next group, I feel like
Right.
Prescott is right there in the mix, and being able to get him in the third round and not overpay like this Team Seven guy did, right? This computer player, he paid for Justin Fields in the second round, and I think most people would have a hard time arguing that Fields is going to do better than Prescott or Lawrence, for example. So I was basically weighed around and got a quarterback of comparable value, at least in my opinion.
Mm.
And that's kind of what you have to do in a super flex, is understand the value, and because these first few picks in your draft dictate your entire team, because then you have to basically fill in the gaps later. So I'm going to go Dak Prescott with my quarterback here.
All right, then we see Derrick Henry, Brees Hall, Mark Andrews will go off, and Jake, you are the last team to pick a quarterback here, being the 10th team. So your thoughts on your choices here now that you have 2 picks coming up.
All right. So, according to ADP, the next top quarterback available is Cousins. Um, I, I personally don't know that Cousins is going to make up the value of some of these higher end wide receivers I'm seeing available right now, such as Waddle and Devontae Smith. Um, Seeing that we're in a 3 wide receiver league. By the way, I did not say this on my first picks, but I have Josh Jacobs in the 7th round. He would be my RB2 next to Austin Eckler. I think he definitely has RB1 upside. So I feeling pretty good about my running back situation right now. So I'm going to take um, Waddle on this pick right here. Now, this is just my strategy right here, but if I'm going to wait on quarterback, I think there's a tier of quarterbacks that most people write off. They don't realize how valuable they can be in fantasy though. And they're a little bit farther down in the draft. And I think if you're really patient, like I like your pick, Grant, on Dak Prescott, but I would say he's probably the last one that I would take
Mm.
that early. And then if you don't get a chance to take Prescott right there, I would say stack up on skilled players, such as I'm going to take Smith as well. So I've got 3 pretty top tier wide receivers going on right here.
So your strategy this mock draft here is saying the quarterback that I was looking at didn't fall, but to Grant's point that he made earlier, I'm not going to panic and say, well, I got to go
Right,
get one. And
right,
you're building positional value with your wide receivers
correct.
and being patient on, I'm going to go draft the quarterback later, knowing there's still value, but that gap between what Cousins has, let's say, isn't as much, and you're getting more because Devontae Smith is now your wide receiver 3.
Mm-hmm.
Right, right. I don't think Kirk Cousins can make up the gap of another quarterback I can get on my next turn.
Okay.
Compared to the wide receivers I just selected.
Right.
So
Yeah, good, good. So like now this is where it's a little interesting for me, right? This is probably where Jeff and Jake might have comments, but like for me, I'm in a weird spot because Ramondre Stevenson is a top pick ADP, but with the sign of Ezekiel Elliott, that becomes a little
mm,
questionable on value. I I also didn't look at DK Metcalf. I have 2 receivers already, right? So I'm not really looking to do a third off the rip on a receiver. I'm a little unbalanced. TJ
mm,
Hawkinson, I personally think there's like the Kelsey and Andrews tier, and then people are below that. I'm not going to pay 4th round for Hawkinson, personally, in my opinion.
right.
Um, Jamar Gibbs, same thing again. I'm a little unsure. So now then I'm kind of doing a little bit of reach of like, okay, now I've got Aaron Rodgers, Daniel Jones, right? Like, do I take Aaron Rodgers on his farewell retirement tour with the Jets, right? Are we going to do this, or are we going to keep reaching? So here's where I'm probably going to pick Aaron Rodgers. Maybe it's a little bit of a reach, but I didn't like the picks before me, and sometimes like you kind of
Mm,
get weird with the picks. So this is probably my
yeah,
least excited of the four I've done, but I have my
I
quarterbacks
get
locked in.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
basically, though, it's the same point that what Jake was saying earlier, though, with that fourth round, where
Mm-hmm.
the scarcity of what you're able to get with, let's say, if you had drafted Gibbs or you drafted Stevenson, the
Mm-hmm.
upside's no longer there. Where yes, they're your potential running back too behind Pollard, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not your running back one. And you, if you're able to, let's say a Najee Harris still falls to you there, or somebody falls to you there, you're still potentially going to take that because you want to take that value.
Mm-hmm.
And the wide receivers don't really excite you in that range as well, just
Mm-hmm.
because what you can get later on. So you're solidifying your second quarterback position and saying, I'm now, potentially done looking at quarterbacks for a while because I have my starters. I may go get one later in the draft as a backup, but I'm solidified here unless I see something fall really quick. So
Mm-hmm.
here
Mm,
I'm looking again. This is positional here for me, and having Rashad White as my last pick with a potential RB2 season, having Nick Chubb, running back position, I think I'm solidified on for at least a couple rounds, where, especially being a three wide receiver start, I need to shore up that position really well. And I think a great stack going in with the Chargers theme here, because I think they could have some really good value. I have questions and concerns a little bit about Allen if age has gotten up to him, but if he is still that number one target, if he runs out of the slot a lot, I like his upside. And taking Keenan Allen as a wide receiver two, that still could be a wide receiver one
Mm-hmm.
for that team. Also looking at the board where two teams do not have their wide receiver two already, or three, four, six teams, excuse me. Well, I'm counting out loud, apparently. Six teams don't have their wide receiver two yet. So if I don't solidify my wide receiver two there, then I'm I'm risking what I'm getting back coming back around.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that we have three teams that have both quarterbacks, one team also does not have a quarterback, which is Jake, which he talked about that. I'm not inclined necessarily to take a quarterback here. Daniel Jones would be the choice, I think, if I were to take a quarterback here. Um, but positionally and team building wise, I like, and you can go one or two ways on this. Very good athlete. He has not played for over a year, but he's on a very good offense. And if we think the offense is going to be well and do very well, Calvin Ridley as a potential, especially as a wide receiver three for my fantasy team, being a wide receiver one for a potential prolific offense with Jacksonville that could take another step forward. I feel solid about that as a wide receiver three.
Mm.
I like that
Yeah,
pick.
that's a good pick. That's a good pick. Um, so here is where I'm getting it gets a little interesting for me. So I'm probably, unless things get weird for me, I'm probably doing this hero RB strategy, which we talked about a few podcasts ago.
Mm-hmm.
I focused on two very good receivers, two, I would say, top of the middle tier of the quarterbacks, right? So I'm feeling good about that spot. So now I'm in this spot where it's like, all right, I don't really want to use my fifth round pick on like a Kenneth Walker, right? I don't see a lot of value there. What I'm looking at is probably another receiver if I can, or a tight end, right? And then you kind of get into the spot with, like with George Kittle, right? Of like, all right, do I reach for not reach? Do I pick George Kittle for tight end availability? Do I try to get another receiver? Like, what's kind of my process there? And that's where, like, I'll be honest right now, I'm not 100% sure on this. It's kind of a weird spot because I like the upside of Kittle. I like the offense. Purdy's going to be the starter. He had great connection with Purdy, but also too, Kittle has had some injuries with his groin the first few preseason games, so I'm concerned about that. And you might have to play the whole like, is Kittle injured or is he not dance the whole season.
Mm.
I feel like I'm kind of stuck, honestly, because there's some quarterbacks here, and then not really a big fan of the Kenneth Walker pick at the moment. And then Amari Cooper, I just the Browns right now, I'm really unsure how they are with Deshaun, and other than Nick Chubb, the Browns is kind of an interesting offense for me. So um, I'm probably in a weird spot, but I'm probably going to end up going with George Kittle against my better judgment.
Well,
Mm.
it's either that. So you take that,
Yeah,
George Kittle being, depending on what rankings you may look at, he could be the tight end 2 all the way down to maybe the tight end like 5,
yeah,
depending on how they want to, rank that up. So it's round 5. You're not paying round 1 price for Kelsey.
yeah.
But then, yes, there's question marks, but you're kind of on the fewer question mark side. As you go down the list, you get more and more. So there's a lot more uncertainty. So, Jake, you have successfully, I would say, in this mock draft, you weighed on quarterback. What is your
I
strategy
did.
looking at who's available?
So right now, based on who I see, I think I'm going to go double quarterback. This is where I take care of both of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And so, first of all, in this position, I would not be upset about taking Russell Wilson. I think he takes a huge step up with the new coaching staff. A very proven, successful coach, to say the least. Jerry Judy's back. I'm not sure that he is going to take enough of a step up to be an elite fantasy quarterback, but I think um, in the AFC West, he's going to have to put up numbers. Everybody knows that. In the AFC period, he's going to have to put up numbers. So, um, but I'm not taking Russell Wilson right now. I'm gonna take what I think is the best quarterback on the board, which I didn't think he'd last this long. I'm taking Jones. Um,
It's a
he's
great value
actually
pick.
he's a great value pick, and he has he brings a lot to the table as far as running ability. I think people overlooked that a lot with him. He runs a lot. My second pick is going to be Jared Goff. I really like Jared Goff this year. He is a Jameis Winston with half the interceptions. He can sling it out. They don't. The Lions allow a lot of points, so they have to keep up. But they also have weapons. I think he's a good late tier quarterback if you have to wait that long.
Mm. That's good. Yeah, that's good. I like that analogy. I like that because, like you said, Jake, you didn't panic on your quarterbacks. You got two that you liked. Same with me. You kind of argue like there's the difference of strategies, right? Like Team Nine, for example, has Josh Allen as a keeper, got Trevor Lawrence right off the rip. I had
Right,
like third and fourth round. You had a fifth and sixth round pick, right?
right,
And you could argue for sure on all of those, right? Like Allen Lawrence
absolutely,
combo is going to be better than probably the Prescott Rogers combo, which is better than the Jones Goff combo. But your role players, right, are better than mine, or better than Team
right,
Nine's so far, right? So
right.
that's the trade off
That
that you're, yeah,
that's the trade off. That's the game we're playing.
yeah,
That's the tough part. Exactly.
mm-hmm.
Is it going to be
Yep,
enough? So
yep, exactly. So for me, my thought process is okay. I've got two receivers. I have one running back. I've got tight end, two quarterbacks. So I'm looking for either a receiver or running back right now to kind of fill out my value. So I'm going to pass on Wilson and Pitts. I'm looking at Hopkins, Judy, Drake London, and J.K. Dobbins. For me, what I'm probably leaning towards is either I'm leaning probably towards DeAndre Hopkins, just because he had a suspension or he was limited in 2022 with a suspension and knee sprain. He is kind of like he's like a wide receiver 15 to 20. Ryan Tannehill has had success with receivers, but typically has thrown the ball around more. So that's what I'm kind of leaning towards for like a value pick in the sixth round.
mm,
And
nice.
as a team building aspect too, I mean, Hopkins, while he is not the Hopkins of the Houston days that we remember, he is still
Mm-hmm.
he still has wide receiver 2 potential. I would say that this year he's not going to be that overall wide receiver 1, but you're sitting him behind Justin Jefferson and Stephon Diggs. You're not asking
Mhm.
him to be more than a wide receiver 2. And honestly,
Yes.
if he does more than that, then that further helps your team build right
Mhm.
there. So
Exactly.
it's, again, it's all about team build. And in my opinion, it's about where's the value. Are we valuing a player correctly? Where Hopkins, we see the name, we know who he is, we know what he's done, but if you value him as a wide receiver 2, and that's what he puts up, then you valued him correctly as he's a wide receiver 2. He's not that wide receiver 1 in fantasy.
Mm.
Otherwise, he'd be
Right.
going earlier in the draft. So, well, Jake, you spent all this time talking about Russell Wilson, and he came back to me. And
He did.
for all the points you said that he potentially could go out and do that in the 6th round, this is a perfect time for me to go grab my second quarterback. I am.
That's a good value right there. I think. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think at the end of the 6th round, I didn't reach for a quarterback. The team 2, of course, it's it's sleeper running their algorithms that they took Anthony Richardson in the 5th round, which you can make the argument, yes, he as a rookie could break fantasy. We didn't see that from any other rookie with his skill sets. I mean, Cam Newton had a quarterback 1, but he didn't break fantasy his rookie year. So having a safer option in Wilson, where even if he still has dropped off from the Russell Wilson that we've seen before, he still could provide those quarterback 1 numbers as a quarterback 2, maybe a low
Mm.
quarterback 1, but it's still that quarterback 1 potential in a quarterback 2. The second area I'm looking at here is now my tight end position, where there are a handful of teams that still need a tight end. Jake's looking at one at the end of the draft, or at the end of potentially this round. If I'm looking at the board, team 9 potentially is, as well as 8 and 3. So few that are off here that I like. We have Dallas Goddard and or Darren Waller. And Goddard, if something were to happen to both or one of Smith and or AJ Brown, which we don't hope anything's going to happen to any player. We want all players to be healthy. He is in line for even more of a target share than what he had last year. Darren Waller could also be his team's leading target getter with the Giants. It's a different offense. It's not as high powered. They also could take a step back from last year of what we saw. So those are the 2 options in this 7th round that I'd potentially be looking at. Either one, I think I'd go with the safe floor here. Less injury risk, because Waller does provide some injury risk, which Waller then went in this round as well. But Waller provides some injury risk, also very high ceiling. So there is
Right.
definite possibility that he could just lead the league in targets as far as tight end positions, which I know Kelsey has done that, but you never know. But building some safety here with my tight end, so I can hopefully not have to take another one or very late. So Grant,
Mm.
Mm.
you
Yep.
are now up.
Good. Yeah, so kind of back to I'm in the same situation where I've got one running back, I've done my 3 receivers, I have my 2 quarterbacks and my tight ends. So now, for me, my logic is I try to fill if I can. I try to bounce the first 8 rounds, right? I try to bounce around to get all of my starting positions filled and then go to my bench. In the past, this is different for every draft manager. In the past, I've made a mistake where I was like, oh, this is value here, this is value, this is value, and all of a sudden in the 11th round, I'm getting a second a second string running back on one team, and I don't put
Right.
any points in that position. So here I'm looking for a running back so I can kind of fill out my starters and then look for that flex, after I keep Pollard in the 8th for my 9th round pick. So for me, I'm kind of looking at Miles Sanders, Cam Akers, and understanding what's going on there. For me, I'm kind of doing a hero RB strategy based up also too on my you can just like look at my team here. Um, what I'm looking at is several different things. I like actually Madison's also a little bit of a reach that I like too, because He's kind of going to be like the stud running back on the team for
Mm,
Minnesota after Dalvin Cook left. So I'm actually going to
yeah,
reach a little bit and go Madison here.
I like
So
that.
yeah, we'll discuss that pick after this is over. I'll explain a little bit my logic here.
I'll tell you. Well, I just want to say something right now. I have lost sleep since I found out you were keeping Tony Pollard. That is an absolute insane value for an eighth round
Yeah,
pick.
yeah,
Well, if you look at your draft strategy, you had no worries about your RB1. It's an
yeah,
automatic solid
yeah.
RB1 in the eighth round. You can just sit back and look at value for all the other positions. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I got my three wide receivers, got my two quarterbacks, I got my two running backs. I do need a tight end. I don't want to reach for one. Um, I think a good, fairly underrated tight end is Freiermuth from Pittsburgh. I think he's a pretty solid pick later on. Um, I think right now I think I'm gonna shore up my running back. I've only got two, and Cam Akers is sitting right here.
Mm.
And if he stays healthy, I like his chances of putting up points. So I'm gonna take Cam Akers.
So, and I'm gonna um, I'm gonna talk through this here real quick. So, I think where if you're on the end where you were at, Jake, in that same position, and you really wanted to get a tight end, and you want to make sure you got the guy that you were targeting. So, let's say in this scenario, you
Right?
wanted Fryermuth, and we're concerned. You looked at the board, and according to the board, there's still one team that does not, or two teams, excuse me, that do not have a tight end.
True.
So there's a risk that you may not get that guy that you're
That is
targeting
true.
there. So having a reach there, I understand the thought process, not reaching, not saying that's the wrong thing. But I also understand that if you're on the end, you have to be okay. And I said this at the beginning, you have to be okay with taking a reach on a player, maybe a round or two, because your picks are there's so many picks in between where you pick from back to back. So
Right.
taking a third running back there, not a bad strategy. Understand it. I think where this mock draft varies from potentially a in person, Alvin Kamara goes off in the 8th round. He's only missing 3 games. He also has RB1 upside as well, or to finish as an RB1. So I could see Kamara going 2 or 3 rounds earlier. But
Right.
again, if he lands there, that's a good value, real good value.
Absolutely.
To speak to mine, it's a team building one as well, but I need to address the running back position. And with what I have in Rashad White and Nick Chubb, I can take a player like Javonte Williams, and if he starts slow, what I can do is hold him on the bench and know that um, I can afford him to start slow. It's a risk because of injury, but he came back. We saw him play in the preseason. He's not had any setbacks so far with his ACL. We are 10 months out of that ACL injury. So this is an area in the 8th round. I'm okay saying I need to wait a few rounds. We just talked about with Kamara needing 3 games. Again, this is team build here too, where I have Nick Chubb. I have Rashad White, which I think is an RB2, and Javonte Williams. He profiles similar to a guy like J.K. Dobbins, who went 2 rounds earlier. And while we saw the risk is Dobbins from last year, where he wasn't fully healthy, this is a
Mm.
totally different situation. So I'm not necessarily going to be scared off by it because I'm not seeing him injured as he is. He is potentially going to be ramped up that by the end of the season, I have another RB1. So with that being said, I'm going to look again now at my wide receiver area. And as I scroll down, I also see some fairly good running backs that I could take here. And, I said wide receivers. Now that I look at it, I'm going to switch my thinking go with a running back that I like a little bit more, where I can get some better value wide receiver wise. If I remember my build, I have my 3 wide receivers. So at this point, I'm looking for depth on my team. And a player I really like for depth, and again, if I need a player as in my RB2 spot, if something does happen to Javonte Williams, I can take David Montgomery. And yes, he is sharing the backfield with Jameer Gibbs. But if he gets at least 50%, if not more, which I think he should get more of that rushing share, that's again a good offense that we want to target. So that would be
Mm.
my pick there and reason why. So Grant.
Good. Yeah. So, looking at this, like I'm at my flex spot, right? So I have my two running backs. I got all my positional players. I got my team filled out minus my flex. So I'm just looking for best available. And look at the board. You've got Bryce Young, which I've already got a quarterback. Um, and something that we'll talk about later too. But the way that my bye weeks worked out, I'm kind of screwed on week 7 and 13. So I think instead of getting a bunch of backup players for that, I think I'm just going to commit with the way that this draft is set up is just like taking a loss or doing waiver wire picks for that week, honestly, rather than try
Mm.
to like get value in these rounds for those players. So back to the discussion for the pick that I want to do. I'm looking at the options are like Tyler Lockett, a Dalvin Cook, right? Are kind of the options. Um, I like Dalvin Cook a lot, but he's in an offense in a running back room that's really crowded with Brees Hall, Michael Carter, and himself. Um, and also too, he's working through some injuries, I think, as well. He had a shoulder problem a few weeks ago. So I'm probably going to do Tyler Lockett. It's right now the best available receiver. Plus, with how Geno Smith's campaign went last year, Tyler Lockett was Smith's favorite target. So I'm hoping that we get a couple more seasons out of Tyler Lockett, and that's who I'm going to go with for my next pick.
So
Mm.
he went after Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Grant, just so you know, that would have been the wide receiver had I not went with David Montgomery and shored up a running back
Mm-hmm.
there. So I think that's a great value, especially going after Jackson Smith and Jigba in this mock draft. This is also where I think a mock draft is not necessarily going to be on par with your real draft, because JSN does fill that third wide receiver role, not the second, and Tyler Lockett's always been undervalued. So,
Mm.
Mm.
Jake, we're in the 9th round. So, who you got, and what's your thoughts?
So I obviously need to fill my tight end position. Fryermuth is sitting right there. I'm going to take him,
The
and
wait paid off.
it did. That was a risk. So I could really use another wide receiver. I've got my 3 starters, and that's it. So I'm looking at best available as far as that's concerned. We're looking at the rookie Addison, George Pickens. I like George Pickens. We got Birch from Tennessee and Dotson, Washington. Um, this is a this is a tough pick. I'm leaning toward Pickens right now. This is his second year. I think he takes a step up. He did pretty good last year. I think he takes a step up this year. They've shored up that O line as well, give the quarterback a little bit more protection. So I think Pickens has a much better, maybe even a really good breakout year. So I'm going to take him right here. I think it's pretty good value.
And second year wide receivers are, now that we're in this last double digit parts of the draft, and for this league, it's you're potentially drafting your bench. My personal preference is I want to draft upside. So, is it a player that provides the upside? Second year wide receivers tend to break out at a higher rate and provide more
Mm.
upside than had you picked somebody like Jordan Addison, where yes, he could have a fantastic career as a rookie. You didn't go Dalvin Cook, but taking that upside, where if something were to happen with one of your starter wide receivers, or you need a flex position here, Pickens provides all of that. And Grant, I've talked through almost
Mm.
half your draft, but what are you thinking for this pick?
Yeah, no, you're good. So this is a little bit of probably a little hometown bias,
There you go.
and saw this guy at Chargers practice. Liked, like you said, this is the potential pick, right? This is something where I have 4 receivers, but
Get that Quentin Johnson, baby.
yeah, I'm looking for a player that is going to have a good upside. You got a
Mm,
new offensive coordinator and a great offensive scheme with an elite quarterback that Jeff took in the 1.1. Quentin Johnson is probably who I'm going to pick.
mm,
He's going to sit on my bench. I'm going to have him for a few weeks, and we're going to see what happens and how he progresses. Ideally, he kind of fills that flex spot. Like I'm probably gonna start Jefferson, Diggs, and Hopkins. Lockett is going to be this flex spot. I'd love if Lockett starts slow. Quentin Johnson just takes off. He's got, and then also something happens to Keenan Allen or something like that. Mike Williams becomes that
right.
wide receiver 1. Quentin Johnson goes in the wide receiver 2. So I'm going Quentin Johnson.
And still good value because unlike like with the Seattle situation, Jackson Smith goes before Lockett. You have the rookie going after,
Mm,
where you're not necessarily overpaying on price. Um, so very good value there. So in this range, where I'm looking at, I've got 4 running backs, and because this is a short bench and we have lots of room on the waiver wire, I don't love going more than 4 running backs. If I'm gonna go 5, I need that value to be there. Antonio Gibson in the 10th is a pretty good value, but I'm also needing a wide receiver here as well. Because I have my 3 that I started with, because I have Lamb, Allen, and Ridley that I started with. So I'm still needing that. I need some backup. So this is where I'm okay reaching a little bit. In our home league, we have 3 teams that will probably be reached on more than any other team. That will be Kansas City, Dallas, and Denver. Those are
mm,
probably going into it. So if you're going into your home league, understand what teams may be favored by those around you. Those will be the players that may get reached on more so than not, just because they play for that team. So I could see reaching on some players. I think on this one, where this guy was getting drafted in the 4th to 6th round last year, he's now in the double-digit rounds. He's on a very high-profile offense. He's also my wide receiver 4 then. He has huge upside, and that is Gabe Davis.
mm.
I'm not particularly in love with Gabe Davis as a player. He's not typically the guy I draft, but I think some versatility there with understanding he has that 3 catch, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns ceiling with Josh Allen throwing the ball. That's
Mm,
there. He also can get you three
yep.
catches for 30 yards. So both are there. And I think with 3 picks left, what I'm looking at here is potentially either adding one more wide receiver, backing up a tight end, and maybe taking a third quarterback. As I look at quarterbacks available, Stafford, I think, is a fair pick. Limit upside, I think. Um, yes, he's an injury away from being out, but Peyton Manning back in the day was an injury away from being out as well. He still played a season. We don't know what's going to happen. Um, I'm not really keen on taking Young or Stroud at this position. I think if I'm looking positionally, I'm going to look at the tight end position and see what quarterbacks come back my way after this pick. And so here I'm going to take Okonkwo from Tennessee as, yes, they're run first with Derrick Henry. Yes, they went and added DeAndre Hopkins. But I think tight end targets are going to be different than wide receiver targets. And
Mm,
Okonkwo last year showed us how efficient he is, even on a limited target base.
Mm.
So that's my pick. And
Nice.
Grant, you are up.
Yeah, so here my thought process is okay, I have 5 receivers. I have basically one of each the other positions, right? So what I'm looking for now is all right, these last 4 rounds, I'm trying to draft 2 quarterbacks, a tight end, and a running back in any order, right? Trying to fill out that way I have replacement. And the reason why I'm doing that is because my top 2 receivers are out week 13. My top quarterbacks are both out week 7. So I basically have to find
mm,
2 new quarterbacks for week 7, 2 receivers as well week 13. So I have 5 receivers, which covers me there, right? But then on my running backs, I need some more depth. So I'm looking for like a combination of 2 quarterbacks, a running back, and a receiver. So looking at those options, since the quarterback, I need them just for 1 week. I don't really care as much. I'm going to wait probably and pick something. I'm probably going to focus on either a running back or a tight end. Most likely running back, just because the turnover is pretty high on running backs. They get injured a lot. So I'm probably going to do something where I'm looking at even like a backup where I've got um, someone that has been a classic backup for a long time, which is AJ Dillon. Aaron Jones oftentimes is on a timeshare with AJ Dillon, or Aaron Jones also gets injured, and AJ Dillon can come in and be like that handcuff. So basically, I'm picking a handcuff at this point with the thoughts that it can plug for Madison or Pollard in those weeks, or if AJ or Aaron Jones gets injured, I can play him.
Well,
I
and
like
to
it.
be fair, in this round, Gibson, Robinson, and Penny are all considered either it's a
Mm,
handcuff or it's a very ambiguous situation where we don't know
yeah,
what the timeshare is going to be. So taking a timeshare in the 11th round, not as detrimental as if you take a timeshare that's in the 4th round. So
exactly.
again, it's about
Right.
position. Where are you doing this at? So Jake, 11th round.
So I think I'm gonna shore up my quarterback position, and I'm gonna take a chance on this new young quarterback for Carolina. Um, I don't think I'm reaching for him. I definitely would not reach for him as much as he's hyped up to be. But if he does end up being what people think he's going to be, he could end up being very valuable on my team,
Mm-hmm.
especially maybe mid-season as he starts getting really accustomed to some of the defenses he's going to see. So we will see. I already have my 2 quarterbacks solidified for who I'm playing, but he's going to be a good, we'll just say a high ceiling. So I do like his chances above like Matthew Stafford or Kyler Murray. I don't even know if those guys are going to play the whole season. So
Again, it's about
um,
upside. So you're picking
it is.
upside here.
I'm picking upside right there. This is late in the draft, so I can do that now. I would like to get a second tight end as well. Dalton Schultz is sitting right here for Houston. I like him. He's a solid tight end at this late in the draft, so I'll be taking him for depth.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, mine same process, going for upside. This is if one of my quarterbacks gets injured or something happens. For me, I am looking at Brock Purdy. He had a great rookie season last year as Mr. Irrelevant, as everyone is aware. Had that injury with the UCL in his elbow, right, against the
Mm,
Eagles. And then, of course, everyone knows what happens with the Eagles game. So he had a great end of the season. He's got great playmakers around him and a great coach. So those things are give me a lot of upside and like it lays the groundwork for a great player. So I'm going to take Brock Purdy. I don't see a lot of value right now in like another tight end. I'm sure I will later. I was actually looking
mm.
at Dalton Schultz, but Jake sniped him. So there you go.
There
So
you
yeah,
go.
I'm kind of looking at the quarterback. I think Brock Purdy will be the extra guy. Again, this is kind of a zero risk situation. Also, too, what I like is if I decide to do a keeper, right? Even though Tony Pollard is probably going to be my keeper again, just because I got him for a great value. Brock Purdy, if he ends up putting another great year, his ADP might shoot up into that like 3rd to 4th round range, and
Yep.
having him as a 12th round pick, which would be an 11th round quarterback or 11th round keeper, is great value.
Which we had that last year with Team 7 picked Deshaun Watson
Yes.
despite his suspension, just picked him in the 12th last year, costing him 11th this year. So it's a good thought process of thinking, what's my value there
Mm-hmm.
potentially later on if this quarterback actually turns out to be something. And so I have 2 more picks because my keeper is my very last pick, Rashad White. So with that, I would like to take another quarterback to have a third. The reason I only want to do 3, and I can do 3 if I align my bye weeks correctly. If I avoid injuries, short bench, I don't have to hold more than three. I don't want more than one quarterback on my bench, just because bench space is limited.
Mm.
With all the upside, I'm taking a bet that Kenny Pickett is actually going to be better than what he was last year. That whole Pittsburgh offense takes a step forward. Same reason as before that Grant just talked about with Purdy. I think with Pickett, where there's opportunity there, and he's got better as the year went on last year as a rookie. Second year, just about to get better. So I'm going to take
Mm.
the option of Kenny Pickett. Again, it's my third quarterback, so I'm not necessarily going to rely on him as my starter if I don't need to. But if he does pay off, then I'm going to go get him. Or then I'm going to have him. I can start him. So let's say if Russell Wilson does not do what I think he could do, but Kenny Pickett outperforms what he's doing, I can switch those players out. It's part of that build. So here I'm looking at wide receiver again. I have 4 running backs. I've got 2 tight ends. I got my backups that I need. I don't really want to house too many running backs, just simply because space is limited. And if I overload on running backs, I'm losing out on what I can get from my wide receivers or my flex. And this is a PPR league. So unless I'm getting a running back that catches everything in this round, which I'm not, but in this round where I'm looking, I like a few options. I do like all the Baltimore options. So Rashad Bateman, Odell Beckham, I think they provide value. There's risk with both, but they provide value for this range with what that Ravens offense could be with the new coordinator. Sean Watt or Lamar Jackson stays healthy all year, so both those provide value. I'm actually going to go a different way, though. Those are 2 I like. Sutton could be also value with what he does in Denver if Russell Wilson takes a step forward. Plus, that would give me a stack, which I already have the Allen Herbert stack on my team. But I'm going to take Sky Moore here. And again, in our league, this may not be available in the 13th round. But the approach I'm taking with Sky Moore here is he could be, we don't know who the number 1 wide receiver in Kansas City is, but he could be that wide receiver.
Mm.
Even if Sky Moore only fills the Juju Smith-Schuster role, one, Sky Moore is younger, has a little bit more athleticism than what Juju had. Juju was a very talented wide receiver, still is a very talented wide receiver. But if his floor is 700 yards and 3 touchdowns for a 13th round pick, that's very doable. If his ceiling is more than that as a 13th round pick, that is great value and great upside. So, Grant, your 13th round pick.
Yes. So I'm filling out my bench. Again, don't want to have more than one quarterback. I do have both my quarterbacks on the same bye week, which is my problem. Was not intentional, but that's the way it worked out. So I'm most likely going to have to play a little bit of shuffle with my bench later in week 7. I'm not going to immediately take 2 quarterbacks though, and just keep my bench space locked up. So
A
I'm
lot
looking
happens in 7 weeks.
exactly, and so I've got
Mm.
five receivers. So basically, my 3 plus my flex covered. And then also my bench, I've got Quentin Johnson, AJ Dillon, and of course Brock Purdy. So for me, I'm probably looking for tight end value. Here, I'm going to go with, I have George Kittle, an elite top 3 tight end. I'm going to go with Dalton Kincaid, the rookie,
Ooh.
who is on Buffalo, who is most likely going to be the starter because Dawson Knox actually has like some injury with his finger. We don't know what's going
Yep.
on. So I think that there's upside there, and especially with tight ends being on an offense, a high octane offense, being a rookie with big play potential, I like the pick.
And
I
again, that
like
goes
it.
to show the importance of follow the news, stay up to date, because that injury to Knox was recent, where Kincaid was already a value or already a target for a lot of drafters. And once the news comes out and more people know, this round 13 may not be there. It may turn into around 11 here in a week. So just pay attention. All right, Jake, your last 2 picks.
All right, so based on my last 2 picks being a quarterback and a tight end, I'm going to grab a wide receiver and a running back. And right now I've got my eye on Baltimore's offense, I think, is primed to be really successful. Odell Beckham is on there. I don't know if he's washed up or not, but again, I'm not reaching for him. Um, he looked pretty good when I watched him in the preseason a little bit, so we will see how that translates in the regular. But I'm going to take Odell Beckham on a flyer that he has a nice season getting ready to retire.
He looked
Going
good in the Super
into
Bowl when we saw him last too.
That's
So
true.
it's true. Going into my running back situation, I think I'm gonna take Elijah Mitchell. He's a very, very talented guy when he's not hurt, and that's rare. Um, but he's playing on a team where Christian McCaffrey also gets injured. So
so
I'm gonna go ahead.
I would say you didn't draft McCaffrey, but had you drafted McCaffrey, say you'd been there in the first round, would you also have that same process to handcuff yourself?
Actually, I think I would. Yeah, especially with someone like McCaffrey who has a history the few running backs. Austin Eckler, I did not handcuff him. I probably should have. Um, there's
There's
just a good
maybe
chance of them getting hurt.
less, yeah, there's maybe less risk with Eckler being injured than
I agree.
CMC, and that could be debatable. It depends on who you talk, but yeah.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Right. I agree. Elijah Mitchell is going to be very valuable if he's healthy and CMC is not. Very, very valuable. So,
Yeah.
and
okay.
he's my last pick. So, yeah.
Sweet. Yeah. That brings up a good point about handcuffs with injuries. So normally, I have a history, whether or not it's intentional or not, to pick frequently injured players. So I have typically done lots of handcuffs for those players. My two running backs, Mattinson and Pollard, have not had an injury history. So I am taking, with the shortened bench, I'm taking a little more of a risk and not getting their handcuffs. I would
Mm,
say also too, in terms of names, they're smaller named running backs. They don't have this established backup. Behind Pollard is Rico Dodal, and behind Madison is, I believe, Ty Chandler. So
Yep.
with both of those players, it's probably gonna be a fight on the waiver wire if one of my running
mm,
backs goes down. But because they don't have the injury history, I'm gonna basically not mitigate the risk. I'm not gonna do handcuffs. Like I said, if I had Christian McCaffrey and Eckler, probably a Saquon, and
right,
Jonathan
right,
Taylor, right? I'm drafting their backups in the 14th, 15th, 13th round. Um,
right.
so for my team at this point, I'm pretty much filled out. I've got kind of one of each on my bench. I'm just looking for value. Looking at who's available. I'm probably just gonna go Alan Lazard, just purely on the fact that you got Aaron Rodgers throwing to him. In terms of like depth, there's Garrett Wilson's ahead of him, but as a wide receiver two on an elite quarterback on a team that has a lot of hype around it, it's not the worst pick in the world, especially for my last
Mm,
round.
I like it.
I'd say again, it's all relative to what the last round is. Again, it's what's the value with the round. So Alan Lazard in the 14th round, fair value, wide receiver two on his team, could have that. If everything goes the right way with the Jets,
Mm-hmm.
very good year. Alan Lazard in the ninth round, that
Mm,
may be a little reaching. Where okay,
Mm,
what's the trade off that you have there? So
mm, mm.
okay, any final thoughts? This is a fun draft. I think really
yeah.
good balance. Really, I mean, again, with any mock draft you do, your draft will not go that way. I will
I,
put money on that.
I would just say, on the subject of handcuffs again, if you're running a league with a short bench, that definitely makes you think harder about whether your current running back situations are injury prone or not, because you just don't have the extra space to just hold all the handcuffs like I have in
Yes.
previous leagues, previous
Yeah.
years. you got to be a little
Right.
more picky about it. So, if you're sitting on a running back who has gotten hurt more than 1 year, even if it's a semi minor injury, I would probably lock a handcuff up. But if not, I would let him. I would take the chance. You would kind of have to.
Yeah,
So,
and that's what I like about I actually put that rule change in because normally we have a 7-person bench,
right,
and it what it does is it people are incentivized to hold and to really clutch at a lot of these handcuffs, these like low hanging fruit rookies, things like that. What I like about this, it
right,
makes it more competitive. First off, it makes the waiver wire better.
absolutely,
So if someone's injured, you could. It also too, I like it because it makes it more competitive, and like you have to think twice. Like Jake mentioned, if I had 2 more spots, right, I'm probably drafting the handcuffs my running backs, regardless of who they are. But
hundred
now I
percent,
can't do that because I have like viable players on my bench, and I can't draft those handcuffs. And so it's
right,
one of those things of like if you have a elite like a Christian McCaffrey, for example, that's Elijah Mitchell is a great example of getting that taken care of. But it's yeah, it's definitely interesting strategy, and I think I'm gonna enjoy the shorter bench with this league. I think it's gonna make it a little more competitive, and I think it's gonna help out with some of the hoardy mentalities that some teams can have, where they
yeah,
just kind of clutch at things, and also to dump like 5 players in one trade, and you can't really do that anymore because no one has the bench space for that.
right.
Yeah, I
I
think
have, I love that change on going to five. I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely love that. Yeah,
and it depends. Like you said, it just you have to change your draft strategy. So if you have a deeper bench, you play in a league where you're drafting into the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th rounds. That's where you can draft for depth if you need. So just remember that I think one of the biggest things is know your league settings. Is it a PPR league? Is it standard? Is it a superflex league? Um, do you play defenses? Do you play kickers? In this league, we don't
mm,
play with defenses or kickers. Is an IDP league, so know your league settings. Know what you're going into, but just like you saw here on this stream, pay attention to the board. Pay attention to your league mates. Know some of their tendencies. What are they thinking about doing? As you look at your league mates' teams, understand who may or may not be available based on what their team construction is, and know if a player you want to
Hmm.
wait on could be
yeah,
there or not. He could be there. He may not be. Players are going to do, fantasy managers are going to do crazy things. We all do that this time of year. But the biggest thing I would say before we log off here, go actually do our draft, is to have fun. This is a game that we play that's on a game. Football's a game. Fantasy football's a game that's played based on that game. So, regardless of anything, have fun. Trash talk all you want to your league mates. Tell them how bad their team is and how
that's
much they're
right.
going to suck. But have fun. Don't take it too seriously. And everybody out there, happy drafting.